Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. Could we leave the door open, please? Oh, it obscures the camera. Okay. Can we find another door to keep open so we might have a bit of air through? So thank you very much indeed. David, if you could open it 3/4 open as opposed to 1/12. No, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. See, you're not chief exec for nothing. Sorry. Thank you, colleagues. Colleagues, I've got apologies for absence from Councillor Susie Horton and Councillor Jeanette Smith. I know Councillor Stephen Morgan is unable to join us because he's on board ship in Plymouth today, but I haven't heard from any of the Conservatives. Colleagues, any declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Colleagues, the minutes of the previous meeting, are you happy with those minutes? Yes, you're all happy with that? Thank you. Okay, item 4, Jerry, Mr. Brown, sorry, you're wanting to come and speak to us, Mr. Brown. It's on this item, is that correct? Correct. Do come and join us. Actually, I can't see any good reason. Why don't you just join us and bring everything with you so you're at the table properly? I'm all set up. You're all set up, all right. Well, the rest of us might all be het up, but yes.
Right, good afternoon.
And welcome.
Thank you. Short deputation. This is on item 4, appointments. So thanks for giving me the time to make this short deputation. The theme is one you're all familiar with. Agenda item 4 refers to appointments to outside bodies. The bodies being appointed to are charities and companies, and in some cases both. There are 6 companies on the list. The appointment of PCC representatives is, I think, intended to ensure that the voice of the people of Portsmouth is represented and to communicate back the direction and performance of the organisation to which they've been appointed. Yet here we are, in Portsmouth, with a few items missing off the list. PCC owns a number of businesses, some of them companies and some of them businesses within PCC. These include MMD, the shipping company, the property portfolio, a strange beast, and Victory Energy Services Limited. Between them, these are the biggest commercial assets and liabilities that PCC owns. Now, MMD has a turnover of about £14 million and pays significant amounts to PCC in rates and lease fees, without which we could be in trouble. Yet there's no independent non-executive director appointed to ask sensible questions like, so where is the marketing and sales director? Or, why don't we have contracts with 7 of our top 10 suppliers? Or, why are we being overcharged by the recruitment agencies? The property portfolio, however, represents an investment of give or take £100 million and is intended to create a significant income stream, yet there is no independent non-executive director to ask sensible questions like, so where is the reporting that we promised to provide for the last 2 years? Or where is the risk register? Vessel, Victory Energy Services Limited, is currently developing its offering, and we've spent well over £1 million so far with no income. Yet there is no independent non-executive director to ask sensible questions like, so if this approach has never been tried before, why isn't that mentioned in the risk register? Or, how do we validate the claims of the business plan to be able to outstrip the client acquisition capability of all the previously established companies in this sector? Or even, where is the public reporting on the progress of this venture and the monthly progress review meetings of a business that is consuming a lot of our taxpayers' cash? These are big ventures, And we continue to run significant risk by not managing them properly, and I mean by managing them like a business. I would request that independent non-executive directorships be added to the list of appointments by Portsmouth City Council from this day forward. That's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Brown. And I think you have a good point that on companies that are wholly owned by the City Council, and we will need to review that over the coming months. I think in terms of property portfolio, that is very much the same as having the council housing property stock as well, which we do as part of the core business of the council. But I think in terms of companies that the City Council owns, I think there is a strong argument which you've articulated in terms of having outside people on those. But we'll need to examine those. And I'm sorry, having only just taken over the council, there are quite a lot of other things that are causing significant concern that we're looking at the moment. But because we're making appointments today, that doesn't mean that that's the only time we do, and therefore this can be addressed in the near future. So thank you very much indeed for coming, and my thanks. Okay, on outside appointments, colleagues, this is looking at ones where we didn't have anybody nominated, or we had gaps last time. So colleagues, if I can run you through them. The first is the City of Portsmouth Sports Council, where we still don't have a Labour councillor who wishes to do this. So I think we should leave that vacant for the Labour Party to fill if they so wish. The next one's the Duke of Edinburgh's Award Scheme, Hampshire Forum. We don't have a nominee for this. Joe, could you find out from them if they'd be happy with a non-councillor as a contact point, because this is the second time of asking for which we've had no volunteers. The third is the Follington Marshes Management Committee, and Ken Elcombe has volunteered to fill the space left for either a Drayton Follington councillor, which he is, or Labour Party councillor, which he isn't. Then the Hampshire Countryside Access Forum, we had appointed Alicia Denny, who is no longer a councillor, but we're told this has to be a councillor, so we have a vacancy and no volunteer. Paulsgrove Community Association, Jo Hooper has said she's not able to do this, but Claire Udy has said that she can, and if we have a volunteer, that's a good thing to do. That's the Community Association. On West Paulsgrove Scout and Community Association, Gemma New has said she can't do that, and we don't have a nomination. Although I did meet the lady who runs it, who was remarkably impressive at the Civic Awards thing. So, okay, if we leave that blank for the minute. Project Integra Strategic Board, Councillor Ashmore, this needs to be you, but we've found you a lift. The officer attending will give you a lift, because I was worried, because it happens all over the place, I think, in Hampshire, and trying to fight your way through Hampshire on public transport to get to meetings is probably not hugely useful. So I think Colette Hill goes. So are you happy to go along with that?
Yeah.
Good. Safer Portsmouth Partnership, we've requested one Conservative now that we've decided to make this a cross-party grouping again, because crime prevention is so important. The Conservatives are choosing who their spokespeople are at their group meeting tonight, and said that they will put their group spokesman on here. And I think the thing to do in terms of a nominee is to give it to the role, and for them to then notify us who that person is. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Local Government Association, at least for the minute, I'd quite like to do this. I've started off doing some work with them to see if we might be able to standardise the rules for the private hire trade across Hampshire, so that we can bring everybody up to a high level, so that drivers who are driving for companies like Uber can't come into the city having had cars and licensing approvals that are at a lower standard than our own, and the people from the Hampshire LGA were very interested in working on that, so I'd like to continue that. Darren? Sanders?
Gerald, I'm happy to withdraw my nomination. I did it on the basis of no one else was doing it,
Okay.
but I'm delighted that you are.
Lovely, thank you. I'm happy to do that. Over the page, the Push, Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Don Jones says she's unable to take this on, but Judith Smythe had said she'd be the deputy. I would propose that we move her from deputy to full position on that. My view is it should be a member of the opposition, which I know wasn't the view of the last administration, but I think it's important. So if Judith Smythe is happy to do that, that's fine. Sigoma, Lee Mason is happy to do it. We don't have a vacant somebody to deputise for him. I think it's fine to leave it with Lee Mason to do and see where we go, unless somebody's desperate to go to Barnsley on a regular basis. Now, Hampshire Buildings Preservation Trust annual meeting, no nominations received. Patch, this looks after an area of Somerstown, but in the St Thomas's ward. We've got Rob Wood and Ryan Brent. We have a nomination from Claudie, but I'm very conscious this is a St Thomas's. It just looks after St Thomas's, it's very kind of Claire to volunteer, but I wonder if we need to have a St Thomas's thing to. Councillor Darren Sanders.
The reason we have a vacancy is because the third ward councillor for St Thomas, Tom Wood, is on this group in his own right, and so that makes it a bit difficult for him to have two roles, and we've agreed that wouldn't happen previously. So that's why the vacancy has occurred. Gerald.
That's helpful to know, but it doesn't produce us a solution. Rob.
Chair, effectively, in the past, it has been the ward councillors attending this. So, in theory, all the ward councillors are actually there. So, it's only because Tom's got a different role that we're not filling all the gaps. So, I think the numbers, the three numbers, is two of us are going to be there, the ones that aren't on there, and Tom's going to be there anyway. So, there's no reason that we need to, and it is very specific to St Thomas.
So I think what we should do then is to nominate Tom to be on this from the council, to then free up another space for the community, because Tom was appointed to it before he was elected by the community, and therefore it should be the three ward councillors in my view. So I'm sorry, I'm going to suggest we put Tom Wood on there. European City Twinning Committee, we've had two nominations to fill two vacancies, one from Claire Udy and one from Joe Hooper, and I'd suggest we say yes to both of those. The HIFA Committee, we have two vacancies and we have no volunteers to do that. The South East Employers, Jim Fleming and Stephen Morgan have volunteered to go, but there's space for two deputies, but I suggest... Darren, would you like to accompany them?
Delighted.
Why?
It's a deputising role as opposed to a full member role.
But looking at them, I would presume that you will attend every single meeting as the deputy.
I'm a bit more sanguine about my colleagues than you are.
Okay. All right, we'll look at the end of the year. Colleagues, are you happy with those? Thank you. Armed Forces Champion, you've got a report here, and I've agreed to this. They would like to add a couple of words to the recommendation, which are as follows. Councillor Frank Jonas has kindly agreed to act as the Armed Forces Champion representative at times when the champion is unavailable, for which I am very grateful to Frank for volunteering to do that. Colleagues, are you happy with that addition? Lovely. Local plan progress, Claire. And could I please have a glass of water? Joe. Oh, no, Benjamin. Claire.
Right. Toby's going to introduce the item and both of us will answer questions.
And for the point of view of the cameras, do you want to introduce who you are, as people may not know who you are?
I'm Claire Upton-Brown. I'm the Assistant Director of City Development.
And I'm Toby Ailing, Planning Policy Manager.
Okay, Toby, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll try and be relatively brief, just to run through the main points in the report, where it seeks to update members on progress for the local plan, endorse the actions that were currently underway, and revise, consequentially, the timetable for the finalisation of this project. So the local plan is development strategy for the city, setting out how growth and infrastructure will be delivered over the next 15 to 20 years. And this report makes clear it's governed by regulations set down and will be finally addressed through a public inquiry called a public examination. So it's a heavily regulated process, and what we have to do here is set out in the numerous forums. The report sets out progress we've made to date in that a number of specialist studies are underway, some of which we're undertaking on our own, others with our neighbours in PUSH, Partnership for Urban South Hampshire. There has also been some developments which members require updating on. We take them through here. In particular, the publication of the proposed revisions to the National Planning Policy Framework by the government, and the report sets them out in some detail. There's two I'd really like to focus on. One is the new standard methodology for housing numbers, and the other is a requirement for a statement of common ground now that we prepare with our neighbours on strategic planning issues. Page 3 and onwards of the report spends some time discussing the standard methodology for housing numbers and where it sits in relation to our progress to date, our supply of housing that we need in the city, and what this means for us with the local plan. It used to be the case that councils produced their own evidence on housing need, and although that still can be justified in some circumstances, the government has now published this top-down assessment, which is based largely on nationally produced household projections. The numbers are all set out in the report, but this is showing that on the evidence to date that the council is expected to address a significantly higher figure for housing need than previously was the case. These figures will also change over time. The implications of the government's standard methodology is that it's quite a simple formula, but the values that are plugged into that formula are published periodically by the Office of National Statistics. The next critical date for us will be in September, where new household projections will be published for all authorities. So us, like other councils, we're all waiting now to see what those projections and those figures will be. But we are, in effect, at the mercy of those publication of that approach. In a very similar way, the government has now said that it will standardise the treatment of student accommodation and what that means for and how that interacts and how it is treated in planning terms in terms of delivering potentially wider housing need. And again, they've published the approach that we are all to follow, but we don't have the actual ratios and the figures, so we can't actually advise at the moment on what the delivery of student housing in the city at the moment is actually going to count, if you like, in planning terms towards that overall housing target. So it's a little bit of a holding position for now. Hopefully those figures will become available later this year, but we have no published timetable for them. The paper then also talks about the housing delivery test. So there is now going to be a continuing focus on delivery of the plan and implications for what if you say you're going to put something in the local plan, it's going to be a higher bar for us to test to show that we're actually going to be delivering it. And that is what the focus of the independent inspectors will be on increasingly as time goes on. So in other words, we need to be demonstrating a reasonable expectation that what ends up in the plan can be delivered. If we don't deliver it, there are greater implications for the council than maybe have previously been the case. At the moment, the government is saying that if the plan is not being delivered ultimately, that we will fall back on national planning policy rather than local planning policy, and there are potentially other implications to follow. But at the moment, this is the offer from the government. You can have a local plan, but then you have to deliver it. Finally, the report then talks about the duty to cooperate. and more formalised expectations for how we discuss planning issues with our neighbours. In the past, we've used Partnership for Urban South Hampshire as a mechanism to undertake the duty to cooperate, to talk about sub-regional planning, housing need, infrastructure requirements and so on. This is set to become more formalised under proposals published by the government, that we now have to produce something called a Statement of Common Ground, but it is in effect revisiting and formalising work that we have been there before in previous rounds, such as the publication of the South Hampshire Strategy and other things. In areas such as Portsmouth, where we are facing high housing need and restricted capacity to deliver that housing, the expectation is that we then talk to our neighbours, should it be the case that there is a level of unmet housing need in this area, that we need to talk to our neighbours about. Experience of previous rounds of this has shown that it can be very time consuming, it's very difficult for all parties, and we're trying to make it clear in this report that we will undertake this work as readily and as quickly as we can with our neighbours, but obviously it takes two parties to have a dialogue, and we will just have to see where we get to with this in the time that we have. Our understanding of the best way to manage this in the first instance is to get our own house in order with a draft plan and be able to progress that as quickly as possible so that we understand what we can deliver alongside our neighbours, so that we can have that conversation as meaningfully and as early as possible. And that then feeds into the recommendations of the report. Finally then, there's a section on taking the plan forward. For a number of technical reasons around housing numbers and household projections, we're looking to move the plan period. So the previous consultation on the plan was for a period from 2011 to 2034. That was because it relied then on a series of pieces of evidence that are increasingly out of date. The changes I've already outlined on housing figures and other things mean that really 2016 to 36, from my perspective as a technician, makes much more sense, and that's what we'd like to proceed with the plan. Obviously it's not changing anything but the back date and moving things 2 years forward, but we expect this plan will be judged on a set of things called the 2016 household projections, so that's more sensible. Also, our neighbours are all producing plans to 2036, so it will help those duty to cooperate discussions go a little more smoothly. What the section also talks about is consequential revision to the plan timetable. I've said that to help our discussions with our neighbours, it's helpful to establish what we can deliver as soon as we can. Therefore, though we're talking about having an additional consultation towards the end of this year before we finalise the plan next summer, it's important to stress that what we're not talking about is the sort of consultation that people saw last summer, which was an issues and options. As far as is possible, this will be a far more clear, this is what we expect to be in the final, so much more a draft plan approach, and it should look and feel much more like a local plan that members currently use in Development Control Committee. So on the basis of that, we're asking you to agree a change to the local plan timetable, which involves us going out hopefully at the end of this year for a draft, what we call a draft plan consultation, with then a final formal consultation on what we actually expect the plan to be in the summer of next year. And we do actually think that's quite challenging given the number of technical issues and the emphasis on delivery. That's the point. It's not about putting out what we think would be nice to have, but judging that against what we can deliver. And we think given that balancing act and the level of comfort and certainty that we need, we think that that's the best timetable that we can manage. If events change and things change, we will be bringing back a revised timetable, but obviously there will be reasons for that. We think we can deliver this at the moment.
Thank you very much, Toby. Can you tell me, or between yourself and Claire, roughly how many new houses or new homes has Portsmouth been delivering over the last few years on a per annum basis?
So on average, we've been delivering approximately 400 homes a year since 2011. There's been previous years where we've delivered higher figures, but they've been with significant change, such as Gunwharf or other items being delivered. But 400 has been the recent delivery rates.
So So just let me understand this better, if you wouldn't mind, Toby. So the housing need assessment that the City Council has done for the needs of the population of Portsmouth has produced us a number of either 584 or 740 of what's actually needed in this city. But we're only delivering 400 new homes per annum at the moment. So the government are going to set us a higher target of 868 homes to be delivered, which is more than we think is needed locally per annum and is over double what has been delivered. And if we don't hit the target, that we don't have any local evidence is needed, and where we have no evidence of it being possible to deliver, they will then penalise the council. I think a yes or no answer would suffice.
Can I say broadly yes?
But that is ludicrous. That is absolutely ludicrous, isn't it?
Nobody said it wasn't going to be ludicrous.
Mr. Chief Executive, would you like to put your loudspeaker on, please? I'm sorry I missed that comment.
Yes, there are major difficulties with this, and when you look at recent historic building rates compared to the figures that are coming out from the new government regime, they're, yeah, in our case, it's almost double. Well, it's more than double.
And where do they expect these houses to be built? Are they expecting us to fill in the harbour completely? Okay, thank you. Councillor Rob Wood, followed by Councillor Darren Sanders.
Given the numbers there, and you talked about an accord, a statement of working togetherness, etc. Does that have any teeth? Because clearly the issue is going to be, there's going to be numbers being driven for the south, and there's a finite amount of land you can build on here. So I can absolutely see us knocking on the door of other people to help out on this. So that accord, is it got teeth, or is it just a dib, dob, or does it actually say this is how we are going to resolve a dispute between partners?
Well, the line in planning terms is it's a duty to cooperate, not a duty to agree. But I must say that having been to a recent examination in Guildford, they're in obviously it's a very different place, but the inspector took 2 days just to go through housing numbers, and then a further day on whether the duty to cooperate had been taken seriously and discussed at length with neighbouring authorities. So planning inspectors take the end result of this very seriously, and whether or not the agreement and whether the consideration of wider housing need has been taken seriously by both people who perhaps can't accommodate their development as well as people who perhaps can accommodate a little more, that has teeth on both sides.
A couple of questions and then a comment, if I may. In the housing targets, presumably they're set by government and they're going to be set by government. Is any account taken of affordability criteria at all, or is it just purely a numbers game?
The affordability is a factor, so we have quite a simple formula that's been published by the government that they are telling us that they want us to use in the future. We expect that formula to be confirmed before the summer recess, these proposed revisions to the NPPF, but it has two factors in it, two main elements in it. One is the nationally provided household population projections. This is in national statistics, demographically led sort of numbers of household. And then there's also an additional uplift, which is based on the affordability of housing in that area. And the affordability in this context, the government says, is the relationship between the market, their price of market housing to purchase and incomes in that area. And depending on how high that ratio is, because in all areas now it's much beyond the old-fashioned 3 times earnings sort of for a mortgage. So depending on how high that ratio is, depends how much an additional increment you get. So the formula is straightforward. It's the numbers that go into it that are complex and difficult, and it's only as this year plays out that we will know what the final figure will be.
I think we've got a rough idea that we've got too many people who can't afford homes in the city. I think that's a simple argument. So I'm expecting a lot of housing people can afford as a result of this. Coming back to your the emphasis that's being placed on delivering the houses. In one of your paragraphs, you talk about theoretical capacity for what this city can deliver, which is miles below the need that is estimated, and definite, and even more miles below the current projections. So we know that theoretically, irrespective of what we're currently building, we can't build the number of homes Push says we need, and the government says we should have, based on this weird centralised projection that relates not at all to need. So therefore we're going to have to rely on other councils turning round and saying yes, basically, to cooperation. And if we don't do it, we'll get punished broadly. What if those councils say no?
Well, the risk for us is that our future inspector, looking at our plan, is not convinced that we've really done either all we can to accommodate all the growth that we can, or that we've actually addressed meaningfully with our neighbours. The risk for our neighbours is when they come to bring their plans forward, and we are in many respects on a broadly similar timetable, that similarly they haven't treated that duty to cooperate seriously either. So it is on both sides is the risk. If the inspector is not convinced ultimately, he or she would either send the plan back for further work, or just say that the plan is unsound, and then we all fall back onto national planning policy without reference to local circumstances, which is a risk that most people are loath to take. Because it doesn't reflect necessarily the local circumstance of the city. So, for instance, we have policies which are strong on protection of certain employment land, protection of particular assets, and some of the nuances, design, and the way policy is delivered that would obviously they're not in national policy. National policy is more about just taking broad planning themes and balancing them against each other.
Just one comment, if I may, Gerald. Thank you for that, Toby. I don't know what cliche is worse, a Rubik's Cube or a Kafka novel, because it seems to me that unfortunately you're administering one of those two. You're being forced to deliver, not by yourselves, government targets which bear no relationship to the needs the city has, bears no relationship to the ability of the city to deliver even theoretically, in other words, making the city a concrete jungle, or even the ability of what's gone on previously. This, to me, sounds completely bonkers. However, given, and with a distinct possibility that if other councils say no, because we can't deliver, and we know we can't deliver, we will get punished for it. This seems to me to be beyond ludicrous. I'm sorry, I'm sounding even more angry than Gerald is, actually, but I mean, to me, this is an unacceptable position to put our planning department in, who do a hell of a lot of good work in this city, trying to administer the Rubik's Cube that is called planning in this city. And I have to say, I don't want us to be put in this position, but it sounds like we've got no choice but to be put in this position because of central government diktat, and therefore I would support the recommendations and the proposals, Gerald.
Before I come to Matthew, Mr. Lawther, can I check? I'm a council appointee as a member of Push and vice chairman of it. Does that give me a conflict of interest?
No, it doesn't. You've declared your interest. That's sufficient.
Thank you. Councillor Winnington.
Thank you. The first question was, in terms of the cooperation side, does that include the Isle of Wight?
Isle of Wight are a member of Push, but really our focus will be on, if you like, the eastern half of Push. We're in something called the Portsmouth housing market area, which goes beyond the city boundary from Emsworth to Sedgensworth up to Horndean, and that's really where the main focus of a future inspector and ourselves will be, is on that natural travel to work and the areas that people actually live their lives in, rather than administrative boundaries or who's in or out of Push.
Okay.
Okay. I get that as somewhat a point, but obviously part of our travel to work area is the ride area of the Isle of Wight. So would that be given any thoughts at all by the planning inspector?
The way it's commonly undertaken, due to corporate discussions in the past, is you go with your nearest neighbours first, if you like, the ones you have that strongest relationship, and that's at an authority level. Then you go to the next stage if you don't get any, if you need to go beyond that, beyond your nearest neighbours. So it is within our gift to talk to the Isle of Wight about this, but I know that they're bringing their plan forward as well. They might well feel that they also have an issue with delivery on the Isle of Wight, but it's not beyond the realms of discussion that we don't go there.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had another thing, which was about, is there anything within what the planning inspector would be looking for around sustainable development, and that there is actually infrastructure in place before that they would agree to a plan, or would they say that you have to think that through as well before they'd approve any local plan?
Yeah, if I come in on this one. The plan is about demonstrating how you can deliver growth, so it is required of us that we actually identify the infrastructure that we need to support that growth. So it's a strategic infrastructure plan as well. And then sitting beside the local plan, we have the infrastructure delivery plan that then goes further in terms of all the infrastructure that we need to have delivered, and also identifying where there may be gaps to support the growth that we're promoting through the local plan.
Yeah, and can we make this last one, because Rob's meeting starts here at 4:30.
Thank you. And it's just a very quick comment. I think it's just to agree with Councillor Darren Sanders that it does seem like we are being dictated to from the centre. We're in severe problems of actually being able to deliver this, and I think we're in real trouble in terms of and it wouldn't be through any lack of effort. There is a real distinct possibility we are going to find our local plan rejected because it's just not seen as being deliverable, because it can't be deliverable. So again, I reluctantly accept the recommendations, but I do think that more needs to be done by central government to recognise, especially in our case, Portsmouth's case, our ludicrously restricted boundaries of circumstances going forwards.
Okay, Councillor Lindstag.
Given that the chances of us not being able to build that many houses that are required, either here or other authorities, would we then be forced down the route of having to build multi-storey accommodation, not necessarily in the best place, because traditionally multi-storey buildings are in the central business district, and we haven't got that much room in the central business district, so we're looking at possibly around the shoreline, which is not the best place to have multi-storey buildings. So there's two parts to that question.
Well, certainly high-rise development, if you like, which we've all taken in the past. I mean, development over 6 stories in this city is, as you say, it is appropriate in some parts of the city. It remains to be seen whether the sort of arguments we've been discussing today about housing numbers mean that a planning inspector would still consider our current approach, which is to encourage it in certain parts of the city first, still applies. But we would have to be very certain of our case before we were to recommend to you, for instance, that approach is still viable, given the other messages that we're getting from government and other things. We'll be keeping a close eye on current practice, current inspectors' reports and all the rest of it, to see how that's playing out over this year.
Okay, colleagues, can I ask you if we could consider an additional recommendation, which I'll read to you now, which Councillor Downing and myself as portfolio holder have just written down. So, recommendation 4 regrets the decision of the government to move away from a locally produced and evidenced housing needs targets to a top-down housing target created by a national formula being imposed that has no relation to local housing needs, the geographic constraints of being an island city, or of our historic ability to deliver housing builds. Colleagues, would you be happy with that addition?
Yes.
Colleagues, with that addition, are you happy with the recommendations before us?
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. The next item, can I suggest that we're going to be asked, I don't have any paperwork for it.
Leader,
Mr.
it's
Lawler.
as on the agenda. You're just asked to note this. The decision has already been taken
Okay.
and it's been enacted.
Do we, Mr. Lawler, do we need to move into confidential session for this or not?
Not unless you want to discuss
No,
it.
I don't
but
want to discuss
certainly
it.
hope you won't.
Colleagues, are you happy with that, to note this? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Can we now pass the room over to Councillor Rob Wood for his decision-making meeting about children. Thank you for your attendance and have a good